Good evening and welcome to History for Your Sleep. You're safe here and you can let your mind settle for a moment. Take a comfortable breath, let the day fade a little, and allow the night to soften around you. If you enjoy these calm journeys, you may subscribe whenever it feels right, no rush at all. Now, a quiet story begins. Tonight, we step into ancient Japan, a world of wooden houses, paper screens, gentle lantern light, and calm footsteps moving across tatami floors. Let's walk there together, slowly, peacefully, and without hurry. Before we step deeper into ancient Japan, it helps to pause for a moment and to feel the shape of the land itself. The islands formed a long, gentle curve, drifting slowly between mountains, forests, rivers, and sea. Almost nothing here was flat, and the earth rose and fell in soft, uneven waves that shaped how people lived, how they worked, and how they rested. Villages appeared only where the land allowed it, in pockets between slopes and riverbanks, or near the quiet edges of forests, or the soil was rich enough for rice. The mountains pressed close, yet they did not feel threatening. They stood like quiet guardians, watching over each valley, guiding the slow rhythm of daily life. The climate carried its own calm story, one that moved gently through every season. Summers grew warm and humid, and the air settled softly on the skin, thick and slow. Cicadas filled the forests with long, vibrating voices that blended with the sound of river water and the rustling of bamboo. Autumn brought a cooler stillness, and red leaves drifted downward in slow spirals, covering the ground like a quiet, colorful blanket. Winter arrived more softly in lowlands, with cold nights and light patches of snow in the mountains, making wooden homes feel warmer by contrast. Spring returned the land to life with blossoms and new shoots, a reminder that the year was beginning again. None of these changes arrived quickly. The seasons shifted like long breaths, and families shaped their routines around this natural, patient rhythm. In ancient Japan, nature did not stand outside the home, it flowed into it. Air moved easily through open verandas, thin paper walls, and sliding doors. The wind brushed softly against the shoji screens, as if greeting the rooms. People moved with the day the same way light moved across the tatami. When morning mist lifted, farmers stepped into their fields. When evening shadows stretched long, fishermen returned quietly to the shore. Even craftsmen, carpenters shaping wooden beams, weavers preparing thread, potters drying clay bowls, felt every shift of weather through their thin walls and open windows. The land was not a distant background. It was a constant companion, present in every profession and in every quiet hour. Mountains shaped the way people traveled. Narrow footpaths wound between tall cedar trees, where cool air lived beneath the high branches. Some routes climbed steep ridges, and travelers paused not from difficulty, but simply to breathe and to look at the world spreading softly below them. Rivers shaped food and work. Fishermen cast nets from simple boats or stood at the edge with long poles, listening to water swirl gently around stones. Rice fields stretched like soft, shimmering mirrors, reflecting clouds, mountains, and sky. Through the year, these fields changed color slowly, brown in early spring, bright green in summer, deep gold in autumn, marking the passage of time without the need for clocks. Humidity softened wood. Tatami floors felt cool beneath bare feet. The long rainy season brought steady, gentle showers, and families listened to water tapping softly against the roof while preparing meals indoors. Typhoons built up slowly, with air growing warm and heavy, and people sensed the need to close shutters and wait. Snow brought its own deep silence, a muffled stillness that made distant sounds feel farther away. Homes adapted to each season. People adjusted clothing, warmed hearts, and moved carefully across floors that cooled during winter nights. The land shaped communities as well. Flat space was rare, so homes gathered closely together, creating clusters where neighbors met daily. Paths were narrow, just wide enough for one or two people. A farmer walking home might pass neighbors preparing bundles of firewood near their doors. A carpenter repairing a roof beam could hear a potter shaping clay nearby. Children ran between houses, carrying messages, chasing insects, or helping with simple tasks. Even on busy days, nothing felt far apart. Animals lived near people in quiet harmony. Cranes stood calmly in shallow water. Small deer stepped gently at the edge of forests. Cats wandered along verandas, settling on warm roof tiles in the afternoon sun. Dogs barked softly at dusk, then curled up to rest once families returned home. Every living thing seemed to follow the same slow rhythm, moving without hurry, as if the entire land breathed at one steady pace. Yet life carried challenges too. Earthquakes shook wooden homes. Heavy rains flooded fields. Winters were harsh in mountain regions. But people learned to read the sky, to notice the scent of approaching weather, to feel changes in the wind. They adapted by building lightly, repairing often, and relying on each other. A carpenter reinforced a roof after a storm. Fishermen shared news about tides and winds. Villagers cleared paths together after branches fell. Hardship softened when shared, and community became a quiet form of protection. The landscape of ancient Japan was more than geography. It shaped how people worked, how they rested, how they moved, and how they understood time. Days opened slowly, with pale light slipping through paper walls. Evenings arrived gently as lanterns glowed warm behind bamboo blinds. Nights stretched into long, soft hours filled with insects, wind, and the distant sound of water. Each day blended into the next, forming a steady rhythm that lasted for generations. And as the first part of our journey closes, evening begins to soften across fields and mountains once again. Light fades slowly, never suddenly, reminding us that life here moved through transitions instead of sharp changes. And in that calm approach of night, the path leads quietly toward the warmth of ancient rooms. But behind these paper walls, one more soft story rests. And if the lantern flickers just right, another secret appears. Homes in ancient Japan were created with a gentleness that matched the landscape around them. Houses did not fight nature, they breathed with it. Their wooden frames stood lightly on raised foundations, allowing air to move beneath the floor and helping the home stay dry during humid months. Most structures were built from local timber, cedar, cypress, pine, crafted by carpenters who learned to work with the grain instead of forcing it. These builders developed a tradition of joinery that used no nails, only precisely shaped wooden joints that fit together softly, almost like a puzzle. When the wind pressed against a wall or when the earth shifted, the house could sway slightly without breaking. Everything was created with this sense of quiet flexibility. Inside, the air felt different from the outside world, not because the house blocked nature, but because it filtered it. Light passed through the paper of the shoji doors in a soft, diffused glow that removed harsh edges from every object. Even a simple wooden cup looked gentle in such light. The floor, sometimes covered in woven tatami, had a dry, grassy scent that changed subtly with the seasons. In summer, the tatami felt cool under bare feet. In winter, it held a faint memory of warmth from the afternoon sun. Wealthier homes had rooms fully covered in tatami, their mats arranged in precise patterns that created a sense of order. Poorer homes often used plain wooden floors or simple straw mats, but even these carried the same natural softness. But if we look a little closer, another quiet truth begins to unfold, hidden not in grand rooms, but in the smallest movements of air and light. Walls inside were rarely solid. Instead, sliding doors divided rooms, allowing spaces to grow or shrink depending on need. A single large room could become several smaller ones for sleep. During the day, doors were often left open, letting air move freely. This made the house feel less like a box and more like an extension of the outdoors. When a breeze entered through an open veranda, it passed through the entire space, carrying scents of pine, smoke, or wet earth from nearby fields. Roof beams darkened over time from hearth smoke that rose slowly into the high rafters. The smoke served a purpose. It dried the thatch or tiles, repelled insects, and helped preserve wood. Many families stored herbs, tools, or bundles of straw in small spaces above the ceiling, where the warm air kept them dry. In the evenings, the scent of smoke mixed with the faint sweetness of tatami and the cool smell of night air drifting through cracks in the walls. It created a layered, gentle atmosphere that never felt heavy. Carpenters, mayadadaiku for temples, machiya builders for towns, and local craftsmen for villages played an essential role in shaping these homes. Their tools were simple: wooden mallets, iron chisels, long planes that created thin curls of fragrant wood. The sound of a plane sliding along a beam was common in many villages, a soft rhythm that blended with birds and distant conversations. Tatami makers also contributed to the feeling of the home. Their woven mats required careful work, pressing straw into shape, binding edges, and smoothing surfaces so that each mat lay perfectly flat. Makers of shoji and fusuma built wooden frames so thin and precise that even the slightest mistake would cause a door to slide unevenly. Every craft added to the quiet harmony that defined the interior world. Even the smallest home had a beauty that came from simplicity. There were no heavy beds or large tables. People sat on tatami or wooden planks and slept on futons that were brought out only at night. Shelves were minimal, often just enough to hold bowls, tools, or a few cherished items. A home's decoration came mainly from the natural materials themselves: the texture of the wood grain, the softness of paper, and the subtle pattern of woven tatami. Light and shadow played the role of art. When the sun shifted, the entire atmosphere changed with it. Homes also changed through the day. In the morning, families slid open doors to let in light and air. Futons were rolled tightly and placed in storage alcoves so the tatami could breathe. A mother might shake out bedding on the veranda, letting the sun warm the fabric. A father might adjust the roof edge or inspect wooden posts for signs of moisture. In homes with a hearth, someone stirred embers and added wood, sending a thin line of smoke upward. Children swept dust or fallen leaves from the veranda, using simple straw brooms that were light enough for small hands. Food preparation shaped another part of the home's daily rhythm. The kitchen space, which was often just a corner with a raised stove, filled the house with scents of boiling rice, miso soup, or grilled fish. Steam rose gently into the rafters, mixing with the ever-present smell of wood. Bowls and tools rested on low shelves or small counters. The sound of chopsticks touching lacquer and ceramic created soft, familiar notes. Even simple meals felt centered and peaceful inside these wooden spaces. At night, the mood changed again. Families closed shoji doors, placed lanterns in corners, and let the warm amber light fill the rooms. Shadows stretched across tatami in long, soft shapes. Outside, insects sang in the dark, and the breeze brushed the paper walls with a faint tapping sound. A dog curled near the veranda, a cat settled in the warmest corner it could find. The home became a cocoon against the deepening night. This gentle transformation, from daylight to darkness, from open room to quiet shelter, was a rhythm shared by nearly every household, whether in a small rural village or a bustling town. The materials and craftsmen differed between regions, but the feeling was universal. A home was not a strong barrier separating people from nature. It was a place where nature entered calmly, filtered softly through paper, wood, and air. And as we leave these rooms for now, the warm light fades slowly behind the sliding doors. Evening settles across the land, inviting us to follow the rhythm of family life into the next part of this quiet journey.
But within simple routines, a quieter pattern hides, and beneath morning footsteps, one more tender rhythm moves. Daily life in an ancient Japanese household unfolded with a softness that matched the gentle movements of nature outside. Morning did not rush into the home. It drifted in slowly, the same way pale light spread across the shoji screens. Before anyone spoke, the rooms rested in a cool hush from the night. A mother often opened her eyes first, taking a quiet breath as she gathered herself for the day. She could feel the faint chill still clinging to the tatami beneath her, the soft scent of dried grass rising as she shifted. Wooden pillars around her still held the memory of darkness, their surfaces cool enough to make her fingertips pause for a moment. The first sounds of morning were always delicate. A sliding door moved along its track with a soft, familiar glide. Bare feet touched the tatami with gentle steps. A kettle was lifted, giving off a hollow, muted tone. Water poured into a pot in a steady, quiet stream. These small noises formed a kind of domestic music that belonged uniquely to the home, a rhythm created not from urgency, but from care and repetition. Each motion echoed countless mornings that had come before, linking generations through simple tasks performed with quiet attention. Futons were rolled up next, folded carefully, and set aside so the room could breathe again. Children learned this routine slowly, sometimes folding fabric crookedly or tugging too fast. A mother smoothed the corners with patient hands, showing them the right motion not with words, but with a gentle gesture. A father shook blankets outside on the veranda, letting early sunlight warm the cloth. These actions were small, yet they kept harmony within the household, creating order before the day properly began. Sweeping the veranda came soon after. Straw brooms, light enough for children to hold, brushed away dust, fallen leaves, and the faint traces of yesterday's work. The sound of sweeping blended with birdsong drifting through the open air. Sometimes a thin morning mist hung low over the yard, lifting slowly as the sun climbed higher. Neighbors gave quiet greetings, a nod, a soft Ohio, nothing hurried. The day began gently, as if encouraging everyone to match its pace. Inside the kitchen corner, the hearth or raised stove awakened with glowing embers coaxed back into flame. Rice was washed in cool water, each grain rubbed lightly between the fingers to remove excess starch. Water splashed softly against wooden bowls. As the rice cooked, thin threads of steam rose toward the rafters, curling through the air like pale ribbons. Its familiar scent, warm, comforting, deeply rooted in memory, spread through the home. It was not simply food, it was the quiet promise of another steady day. Children helped however they could, walking barefoot through the yard to fetch water or gather vegetables from a small garden. The earth under their feet felt cool in the morning, rough in some places, soft in others. These sensations grounded them in their world.
adults taught through example rather than explanation. A mother washed bowls in calm circular motions. A father tied a rope with slow, steady hands. Children watched, absorbed, imitated. Learning was part of living, not something set apart from daily tasks. Inside, rooms shifted throughout the day. Sliding doors opened or closed depending on the moment. When a neighbor visited, doors moved aside to create a welcoming space. When someone needed quiet for writing, weaving, or crafting, a shoji was closed gently, letting the light filter in with a softer glow. Every hour carried its own atmosphere. Late morning sunlight was bright but still delicate, softened by paper walls that blurred harsh edges and made everything inside feel gentler. Work blended seamlessly with home life. A weaver sat near a window where the light was steady, hands moving in quiet, practiced motions. A carpenter repaired tools or smoothed a beam intended for a neighbor's home. Families prepared goods for market, vegetables tied into small bundles, pieces of paper craft, simple pottery finished the night before. Children absorbed these motions without being taught formally. One day, their hands would repeat these same rhythms naturally. Midday brought a simple meal enjoyed together. Bowls of rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, or small pieces of fish were placed gently before each person. Eating was never rushed. Chopsticks touched lacquer and ceramic softly. Conversation, if it happened at all, stayed quiet. People listened to the home itself. The wind outside, the creak of a beam, a faint voice from a distant neighbor. These meals were not about eating quickly. They were about presence and shared calm. As afternoon sunlight stretched across the floor, rooms shifted again. Children played with simple toys, a spinning top, a ball wrapped in cloth, small paper figures they had folded themselves. A mother aired out clothing warmed by the sun, feeling the fabric soften between her hands. A father sharpened tools for the next day's work. A small household altar received its humble offerings, a pinch of rice, a flower plucked from the garden, a quiet moment of thanks. Even this ritual felt as gentle as the movement of a door stirred by wind. Evening approached slowly. Shadows lengthened. Someone checked the lantern oil. Someone closed the outer shutters. Someone swept the veranda one last time, brushing away insects drawn by the cooling air. The home grew quieter, settling into the same soft rhythm that had begun the day. Nothing about this transition felt abrupt. Night arrived like a calm wave, steady, familiar, peaceful. Life inside these wooden, straw, and paper homes was simple, yet filled with a profound depth formed by repetition and care. Every task connected to the next. Every gesture echoed the ones performed by ancestors long before. Daily rhythms were not chores. They were a way of living in harmony with the land, the weather, and one another. And as this part of the journey reaches its gentle end, the home releases the last calm breaths of daylight, guiding us softly toward the night, where lanterns glow, voices soften, and the quiet heart of ancient life begins to unfold.
But in the steam rising from the pot, another memory lingers. And between the sounds of chopsticks, one more gentle truth appears. Food in ancient Japan was not only nourishment, it was the soft center of the home, the quiet heartbeat that carried families through the rhythm of each day. The kitchen did not need to be large to feel important. Sometimes it was only a small raised corner of packed earth, sometimes a simple hearth built low into the floor. And yet from these modest spaces came the warmth, the scents, and the steady comfort that shaped the household's life. Morning began with the washing of rice, a task so familiar that the hands performing it seemed to remember each movement before the mind did. Cool water filled a bowl. fingers brushed gently through the grains. The water turned cloudy, then poured away in a soft, steady stream. The action repeated again and again until the water ran clear, as if the day itself needed to be washed gently awake. The faint whisper of rice settling into a pot joined the early chorus of the home. A kettle shifting on its hook, chopsticks being set out, the soft breath of a child still sleepy from the night. When the fire awakened, the kitchen grew warm in the slowest, calmest way. Embers glowed, flames licked gently at the underside of pots, and thin threads of steam rose into the rafters like drifting morning mist. The smell of boiling rice, of miso beginning to warm, of fresh greens touched by heat, all of it blended into a soft, familiar fragrance that wrapped itself around the home. In coastal regions, fishermen returned with the first hint of daylight. Their small wooden boats creaked softly as they were pulled ashore. Nets glistened with droplets of seawater. Sometimes a child waiting on the beach would run toward a father returning from the waves, their footsteps soft in the sand. Fresh fish, simple, unadorned, became part of the morning meal, grilled over the fire with a quiet sizzle that filled the kitchen with warmth from the sea. Salt workers along the coast prepared the crystals that flavored every home. Evaporating seawater under the sun, stirring, scraping, waiting. The work required patience and rewarded it with pure white grains that preserved food and brightened broths through all seasons. Craftsmen shaped the tools that made cooking feel calm and purposeful. Potters molded clay into sturdy pots that could withstand the steady heat of the hearth. Lacquer workers polished wooden bowls until they shone softly in lantern light. Chopsticks carved from bamboo rested lightly between fingers, like instruments guiding each meal's quiet rhythm. These objects were simple, yet they carried the touch of skilled hands, and their beauty lived in their usefulness. Inside the home, the kitchen corner became a gathering place long before food was ready. Children watched their mother stir miso into boiling water, their eyes following the slow circles of her hand. A father warmed his palms near the fire before splitting kindling for the next meal. A grandmother pressed vegetables for pickles, her motions steady and unhurried, as if she shaped time itself with her hands. These moments were not spoken lessons, yet they taught everything: patience, care, gratitude, and rhythm. Season after season shaped the flavors of the home. Summer meals were light and cooling, with fresh greens and chilled vegetables. Winter meals were warm and filling. Thick soups, preserved fish, and root vegetables simmered slowly until tender. Autumn brought harvest foods, deep greens and golden rice. Spring offered young shoots that tasted like the beginning of the year. The sounds of cooking became a language of their own. The soft bubbling of rice nearly ready, the quiet crackle of firewood, the click of ceramic lids being lifted and set down, the faint tapping of chopsticks on a wooden tray. These sounds drifted through paper walls into neighboring homes, creating a shared atmosphere across the village. Everyone cooked at roughly the same times, so the entire community breathed in unison. When meals were ready, dishes were set gently before each family member. A moment of stillness came first, hands pressed together, a soft itadakimasu, a gesture that honored the work of farmers, fishermen, craftsmen, and even the spirits believed to guide harvests and seasons. Only then did the first bite pass between chopsticks. Children learned to eat with calmness. They held bowls with both hands. They picked up pieces of fish carefully, sometimes concentrating so hard that adults hid a small smile behind their tea. If a grain of rice fell, a child often picked it up with great seriousness, understanding in their own simple way that nothing should be wasted. Meals were lessons in gratitude, wrapped quietly inside the warmth of family. After eating, cleaning became its own gentle ritual. Bowls were rinsed with warm water, chopsticks dried and placed neatly away. Tatami swept lightly to gather stray grains. The kitchen settled into a peaceful stillness that lasted until the next meal awakened it. Even in the empty hours between meals, the kitchen remained alive with memory. Herbs hung above the stove, drying slowly in warm air. A pot rested near the hearth, ready to be heated again. A jar of pickles absorbed flavors in silence. These details grounded the home, tying each moment to the next with quiet continuity. When evening approached, the kitchen glowed once more. Firelight reflected on lacquered bowls. Steam rose again in gentle spirals. The scent of souk drifted softly through the rooms as insects began their night song outside. Families gathered in the same circle as morning, their hearts slowing with the cooling air. Food was simple, but it carried the deepest meaning: connection, comfort, and the soft threads of tradition. The kitchen was the heart of the home, beating steadily through each season, holding warmth even when the world outside grew dark. And as the night gathers quietly around the house, the warmth of the hearth fades into stillness, guiding us toward the next part of our journey, where clothing, rituals, and the quiet care of the body add another gentle layer to the rhythm of ancient life. But behind each fold of cloth, another quiet meaning waits. And within this scent of oils and powders, one more hidden truth gently appears. Clothing in ancient Japan was much more than fabric wrapped around the body. It was a language, a soft expression of harmony, modesty, and quiet beauty. Even the simplest garment carried a calm elegance that matched the landscape, the wooden homes, and the slow rhythm of daily life. People wore robes made from hemp, ramie, or later cotton, natural fibers that breathed with the weather and moved gently with each step. Nothing felt tight or heavy or harsh. Clothes flowed like water around the body, guided by cords and sashes tied simply at the waist. In wealthier families, garments gained more layers, richer dyes, and delicate combinations of color, but the softness remained the same. Dye work itself was slow, patient work. Cloth soaked in deep vats of indigo or plant dyes, absorbing pigment little by little. A dyer lifted the fabric with long wooden rods, watching sunlight touch the folds as shades deepened into blues, grays, and earthy browns. The air near dye shops carried an earthy, bittersweet scent, a quiet perfume of craft and patience. Inside homes, garments were folded carefully. A robe laid on tatami, spread like the wings of a resting bird. A mother smoothed the fabric with slow hands, aligning each corner, teaching children through silent example how to care for the few belongings a family owned. Wardrobes were small, possessions were few, but garments were treated with the respect given to cherished tools, repairing instead of discarding, cleaning instead of replacing, valuing longevity over novelty. A well-kept robe could last years, sometimes even pass from parent to child, with stories woven quietly into its seams. Beauty rituals shaped daily life as gently as clothing did. One of the most striking practices was ohaguro, the blackening of teeth. To modern eyes, it may seem unusual, but in its own time, it symbolized maturity, discipline, elegance. Women painted a dark mixture made from iron filings, vinegar, and tannins onto their teeth, creating a glossy black sheen. The scent was metallic, strong, lingering faintly even after the ritual ended. When a woman smiled, the contrast between dark teeth and pale powdered skin created an effect that was calm, composed, almost otherworldly. It was not dramatic beauty, it was quiet beauty, measured and refined. Powders made from crushed shells or minerals softened the complexion. Eyebrows were shaped, shaved, or redrawn depending on the era and the household's customs. These rituals unfolded slowly in morning light filtered through shoji screens, where shadows moved gently across the floor. The atmosphere felt peaceful, not preparation for display, but preparation for presence. Hair care added another layer to the softness of daily rituals. Women brushed long hair with slow, even strokes, letting natural oils spread through each strand. The brush created rhythmic sounds that seemed to calm the room itself. Some tied their hair with silk cords, others let it fall freely. Men's hairstyles shifted with time and class, but warriors later adopted the shaved crown and tied topknot that symbolized discipline and readiness. Barbers traveled between houses, carrying small scissors, wooden combs, and lightly scented oils. Their tools made delicate, precise sounds as they worked in corners of homes or under verandas. Bathing shaped the body's rituals as well. Public bathhouses offered warm water that soothed muscles and lifted the dust of the day. Families visited together. Steam rose around them with the scent of cypress wood. People washed quietly, respecting the presence of others. Cleanliness was not only physical, it brought emotional calm, a sense of being renewed and prepared for evening. Rituals changed with the seasons. Summer clothing grew lighter and looser, allowing air to flow easily between fabric and skin. Winter robes layered over one another, sometimes lined with padded material for warmth. Families warmed garments near the hearth before dressing children in the cold months. A mother wrapping a warm robe around a child did so with a tenderness that needed no words. Beauty lived not in extravagance, but in tiny details: the sheen of oiled hair, the neatness of a folded collar, the soft clack of wooden sandals on a wooden floor, the smooth surface of a lacquered comb. Even repairs carry beauty. A father mending worn straw sandals on the veranda taught children through example that care, patience, and attentiveness created harmony in the household. Clothing also reflected the world beyond the home. Farmers wore sturdy, practical robes for muddy fields. Craftsmen wore fabrics suited for long hours of work. Merchants wore lighter garments that allowed movement. Nobles wore layers of silk and carefully chosen colors that reflected rank and refinement. Yet across all classes, clothing shared the same aesthetic: clean lines, soft movement, and harmony with nature, never working against it. Children learned rituals slowly. A girl watched her mother apply powder with gentle motions. A boy observed his father tie a sash with calm precision. Small hands practiced brushing hair, folding tiny robes, and adjusting wooden sandals. Their attempts were imperfect, but their sincerity brought warmth to the home. At night, clothing became lighter, a transition into rest. Folds of cloth settled softly against skin as lanterns dimmed and the home grew quieter again. The day's rituals dissolved into shadows, leaving only warmth, calm, and the promise of another gentle morning. And as we step out of this world of fabric and fragrance, afternoon light softens through paper walls once more. Air cools slightly, evening approaches, and the path guides us naturally toward the slow, steady rhythm of labor, where tools, seasons, and hands shaped every quiet layer of ancient Japanese life. But within the simplest tools, one more quiet meaning waits. And behind every slow, practiced motion, another hidden rhythm guides the hands. Work in ancient Japan was not rushed. It unfolded like the passing of seasons, steady, patient, and deeply connected to the land. Every task, no matter how small, carried a sense of purpose that was felt more than spoken. Families woke to the pale glow behind paper walls, and work began not with commands, but with a quiet awareness of what the day required. A father lifting tools from a wooden shelf, a mother preparing baskets for the fields, a child tying a worn cord with careful fingers. Each motion helped the household breathe into the morning. Agricultural work shaped most families' lives. Rice was the center of everything: food, identity, stability, and the measure of survival. Fields shimmered like mirrors in spring, brightened into deep green during summer, and glowed gold in autumn. Farmers stepped into these fields with bare feet that sunk into soft mud. Their hands moved in slow, repeated motions, planting seedlings, clearing weeds, guiding water through channels. These gestures had been passed down for generations, so familiar that the body knew them even before the mind formed thought. In the warm air, water reflected clouds and carried the soft scent of soil that had just been stirred. Tools were simple: wooden hoes, smooth poles, woven baskets, straps made from fiber that fit comfortably across the shoulders. A good tool lasted years. When a handle cracked or a blade dulled, repair came before replacement. A father sat on the veranda sharpening iron on a stone with slow circular strokes, letting children watch and learn the rhythm. Each stroke made a whispering sound that blended with insects and wind. But farming was only one heartbeat of daily labor. Craftsmen filled villages and towns with quiet industry. Carpenters, with their long planes, chisels, and mallets, shaped beams, repaired roofs, and built the frames of homes that breathed with wood and paper. Their work created curls of fragrant shavings that fell softly to the ground like thin, pale petals. A carpenter did not rush. He listened to the grain, felt the weight of each tool, and moved with calm precision. Potters shaped bowls and jars from smooth, cool clay taken from nearby hillsides. Their hands pressed, pulled, and guided the spinning mass into clean, balanced forms. The wheel hummed softly, and the clay, wet, earthy, obedient, responded to the slightest pressure. Firing the pottery transformed it with heat that glowed orange in the kiln and smoke that drifted gently into evening sky. When finished, each bowl carried not just function, but the quiet touch of the hands that shaped it. Weavers worked near windows where natural light illuminated threads stretched tightly on looms. The back and forth rhythm of the shuttle created a calm, repeating sound like a slow heartbeat. Kimonos, sashes, bedding, and everyday cloth all came from this steady, meditative labor. The colors, mostly soft, natural shades, reflected the world outside: earth brown, bamboo green, river gray, cloud white. Even small imperfections added to a cloth's character,
reminding owners that beauty lived in the handmade. And beneath all these crafts lies another truth that often hides unnoticed. Work was not separate from life, it was life. It shaped identity, community, and daily rhythm. A fisherman returning at dusk brought not only food, but a sense of continuity with those who had sailed before him. A woodcutter entering the forest knew the scent of fresh bark as well as his own home. Even children played at work, imitating planting, sweeping, carrying tiny bundles, as if instinctively learning the slow choreography of adulthood. Seasonal work brought its own atmosphere. Spring demanded preparation, tilling, planting, mending irrigation paths. Summer required endurance, long hours in hot fields, sweat mixing with the scent of water and growing plants. Autumn was gratitude, harvesting rice, drying crops, filling storerooms with food for winter. Winter offered time for mending tools, repairing roofs, making baskets, weaving cloth, and listening to the soft crackle of the hearth. No season was idle, but no season felt frantic. Tasks flowed the way rivers flowed, slow in some stretches, faster in others, but always guided by the landscape itself. Neighbors often worked together. A group harvested rice from one family's field, then moved to the next. Voices stayed low. The sound of tools often carried more weight than words. Sometimes laughter rose, a gentle, warm kind of humor that made long hours easier. A child spilling a basket of weeds, a man misjudging the weight of a tool and nearly tumbling backward. Small moments that softened the day. Trade connected distant regions as well. A potter exchanged bowls for rice. A carpenter traded roofing repairs for vegetables. A fisherman bartered fresh catch for woven cloth. Coins existed, but the quiet economy of trust and reciprocity held villages together more deeply than metal could. Even rest carried meaning. A worker paused beneath the shade of a persimmon tree, feeling the breeze cool the sweat of his skin. A woman dipped her hands in a clear stream, letting the water ease the ache of weaving. Children napped in shadows of verandas, while adults continued slow tasks around them. These moments of stillness were not a break from work, they were part of it, balancing effort with calm presence. As evening approached, tools returned to shelves. Ropes coiled neatly, baskets stacked by size. Lanterns glowed softly through open doors. The sounds of work faded into the softer sounds of night, crickets, wind, distant water. Labor ended the way it began, quietly, patiently, in harmony with the world. And as this part of the journey closes, the last warmth of daylight settles across fields and workshops. Evening deepens, shadows lengthen, and the path leads gently inward, toward the glow of village life, festivals, gatherings, and the shared spirit that carried communities through the year.
But within each quiet village, one more heartbeat echoes softly. And behind familiar paths and daily chores, another thread of connection holds everything together. Village life in ancient Japan moved with a calm, collective rhythm. Homes stood close together, shaped by limited flat land, and neighbors saw one another not as distant acquaintances, but as extensions of their own households. A narrow path between rice fields might be used by dozens every morning. A shared well echoed with soft conversations. Children ran freely between verandas, carrying news, laughter, or a handful of wildflowers. Even when people were busy, their lives touched constantly, woven into one quiet,
interdependent community. Mourning in a village sounded different from mourning inside a single home. Footsteps overlapped, water splashed in several buckets at once, chickens rustled in small coops, and someone always swept the front of their house, sending soft patterns of dust into the air. These sounds did not feel chaotic. They blended into the natural fabric of the village. A mother stepping outside with a basket might exchange a tiny bow with a passing fisherman. An elder sitting on the veranda lifted his chin in greeting to a child skipping by. No words were needed. Warmth lived in the familiarity of presence. Villagers shared responsibilities as naturally as they shared paths. If a roof needed repair, several men gathered without discussion. If a family prepared rice cakes for a holiday, they set aside extra portions for neighbors. If a new child was born, gifts of cloth, herbs, or small toys appeared quietly at the door. These exchanges were not grand gestures. They were woven into the rhythm of everyday life. A sense of harmony grew, not through speeches or rules, but through countless small acts of support that accumulated like drops of morning dew. And hidden beneath these interactions was another, deeper truth. Villages breathed in seasons just as the land did. Festivals, rituals, and gatherings marked the turning of the year, reminding everyone that their lives were connected to cycles older than memory. Spring brought celebrations for planting. Families visited shrines with offerings of rice, salt, or sakaki branches, asking for healthy crops and gentle weather. Children wore simple but clean clothing, their sleeves swaying as they ran between lanterns. Drums sounded softly, and priests performed slow, graceful movements that echoed traditions hundreds of years old. Afterward, villagers returned home to share modest meals, grateful for another beginning. Summer festivals felt brighter, filled with music, movement, and warm nights. Lanterns hung from ropes stretched between homes, glowing like small moons against the dark. Bonfires crackled gently, casting long shadows that moved with dancers' steps. Children chased fireflies. Elders watched with soft smiles, hands resting on their knees. Even simple games, trying to catch floating paper boats or scooping colorful beads from shallow water, carried joy that needed no words. Summer air held the scent of roasted food and the faint sweetness of evening flowers, reminding everyone of the warmth that united them. Autumn festivals honored harvest. Rice bundles hung beneath eaves. Villagers worked together to thresh and store grains that would feed them through winter. At the shrine, gratitude replaced requests. Thanks for the harvest, for safe seasons, for the continuation of life. Children helped carry small offerings, trying to imitate the careful steps of adults. A shared meal followed, simple but abundant, filled with the feeling that a year's hard work had found peaceful completion. Winter gatherings were quieter, but no less meaningful. People met in warm rooms, lit by lanterns that flickered gently against wooden walls. Stories were told, tales of spirits, mountains, animals, ancestors. Children listened wide-eyed, their breath soft and warm in the cool air. Outside, snow covered the paths in a thick, calming layer. Villagers walked carefully between houses, leaving footprints that disappeared slowly as night deepened. Winter held a different kind of togetherness, a closeness born from stillness. Through all seasons,
the shrine stood as the village's quiet heart. It was small in many settlements, just a modest structure of wood and rope, but it carried centuries of meaning. People bowed before entering, stepping softly, as though respecting something alive in the silence. Worship was never loud. It lived in gestures, a slow clap, a gentle bow, a coin offered with hope, or a wish whispered so quietly that only the surrounding trees heard it. Children grew into this rhythm naturally. They learned how to behave not by strict rules, but by watching adults move through festivals, rituals, and everyday interactions. A child carrying a lantern awkwardly at dusk became a teenager leading younger ones. A boy helping his father fix a small shrine decoration became a man repairing the full structure years later. Life unfolded through continuity, each generation easing into the paths left by the last. Even ordinary evenings felt communal. Neighbors paused to talk in low voices as smoke drifted upward from hearths. Dogs padded softly through alleys. A woman might hand leftover vegetables to a family across the way. Children invented games in the dim light, their laughter gentle, never disruptive. Some nights were filled with frogs and crickets. Other nights held only the whistle of wind moving across fields. In this shared quiet, villagers felt the comfort of living life side by side. And as this part of the journey nears its close, the village settles into evening calm. Lanterns glow softly. Footsteps fade. The shrine bell gives one last slow echo. Night gathers its cool breath across rooftops and fields. And from this shared heartbeat of village life, the path guides us toward the deeper, more intimate world of houses at night, toward sleep, warmth, and the soft rituals that carried families through the darkness.
But in a child's laughter, another quiet truth is carried, and beneath simple games, one more memory grows. Children in ancient Japan lived in a world shaped by softness, soft voices, soft materials, and the gentle rhythm of daily tasks that guided them from one stage of life to the next. Their laughter was one of the lightest sounds in villages and towns, blending with birdsong, with the creak of wooden houses, and with the distant hum of daily work. Childhood was neither rushed nor idle. It was woven gently into the movements of adults, who taught by doing, by showing, and by letting children observe the steady flow of the day. Many children began their mornings with small chores. They fetched water from the well, carried bundles of firewood from a storage shed, or swept the veranda with brooms almost too large for their hands. The broom often dragged unevenly across the floor, causing a parent to smile softly and adjust the child's grip. A father guided hands without words. A mother tied a sash or smoothed a robe with quiet care. These small moments, repeated every day, built responsibility without strictness, shaping children through gentle repetition. Learning happened everywhere. In villages, most lessons came through imitation. A child watched an older sibling wash rice, then tried with careful seriousness. Another observed how ropes were tied around straw bundles, then practiced the motions in the yard. Boys followed fathers into fields or small workshops, learning how to judge soil, how to hold a tool, how to shape wood. Girls joined mothers in weaving, food preparation, and seasonal rituals. No one expected quick mastery. Skills unfolded slowly, like leaves opening in spring. Small joys filled afternoons, wooden toys, simple spinning tops, carved animals, fabric-wrapped balls, passed between children and were repaired many times. A top that wobbled crookedly across the tatami made children erupt in soft giggles before trying again. A boy trying to catch a cicada watched it leap away in a bright flicker of wings, his surprise turning instantly into laughter, as if the insect had played a light-hearted joke. These small delights warmed the day. Temple schools offered another layer of learning. Inside simple rooms with low wooden tables and inkstones, monks and village teachers guided children through brushstrokes and early lessons. The sound of brushes moving, soft, steady, sometimes hesitant, created a quiet chorus that drifted toward open windows. Ink carried a faint, earthy scent. Teachers rarely raised their voices. They corrected with gentle taps or quiet comments. Patience was not demanded. It lived naturally in the atmosphere of the room. Some children showed early gifts. A girl who threaded needles with unusual ease sat beside her mother, weaving simple patterns. A boy fascinated by clay shaped tiny bowls in a potter's workshop, uneven, imperfect, but proudly made. Parents placed these little creations on shelves or near hearths, treating them with affection. These early efforts made children feel included in the adult world, forming confidence through warmth rather than pressure. Games shifted with the seasons. In summer, children chased fireflies near rice fields, their cupped hands glowing faintly as they released tiny lights back into the warm night. In autumn, fallen leaves piled softly beneath trees, and children ran through them, scattering colors across the ground. Winter brought snow in some regions, where children shaped small figures or glided cautiously across frozen patches. Spring welcomed kites and simple games along blossoming paths. Throughout the year, children's voices mingled with natural sounds, giving each season a gentle pulse of joy. Families shared laughter as well. A mother smiled as her child struggled to fold a futon twice their size. A father raised an eyebrow when a child declared that the family cat understands everything and prefers only the softest tatami. A grandmother told stories drifting between memory and imagination, her voice calming everyone as evening approached. This was humor without loudness, soft ripples that warmed the home. Children also learned respect for spiritual spaces. Passing a shrine, they bowed, sometimes too quickly, sometimes too deeply, making adults hide amused smiles. They learned not to run near sacred trees, not to shout in temple courtyards, and not to disturb household altars. These gestures became lifelong habits, woven gently into their sense of place. Meals gathered families together. Children held bowls with both hands, copying adults. They practiced lifting chopsticks with quiet determination, even when they slipped. When a grain of rice fell, a child picked it up with solemn care, as if repairing a small ritual. A mother nodded approvingly, reinforcing the lesson with silence rather than words. As children grew older, responsibilities increased naturally. Older siblings helped younger ones tie sandals, rinse vegetables, or sweep the veranda. These bonds formed a quiet support system, a soft web of cooperation that held the household together. Adults depended on these small contributions, just as children depended on guidance. Evenings carried their own rhythm. After the day's activities, children settled near the hearth or on tatami mats. Some listened to stories, others folded clothing or carried small buckets of water. Lantern lights softened their faces, casting warm shadows along wooden beams. Cool night air drifted through the home, carrying scents of herbs, smoke, and distant fields. Children grew sleepy slowly, drawn toward rest with the same softness that shaped their days. Their world was not filled with urgency or noise. It was a place of small joys, gentle mistakes, quiet lessons, and soft humor. Everything they experienced prepared them for adulthood, not through pressure, but through steady inclusion. In their laughter, their curiosity, and their simple tasks, they carried forward a cultural rhythm shaped by harmony and patience. And as night deepens outside, the warmth of family circles glows softly. Children settle closer to their parents, stories fade into whispers. The home prepares to shift into the lantern-lit quiet of evening, guiding us gently toward the next part of this journey, where nightfall itself becomes a living presence in daily life.
But when lantern light softens, another layer of night appears, and between the voices of insects, one more gentle story whispers. Night in ancient Japan arrived slowly, as if the day eased itself out of the world rather than vanished. The last of the sunlight stretched across rooftops, catching the edges of wooden beams and sliding doors before fading into cool blue. Inside homes, the atmosphere shifted the moment the light began to dim. A mother paused while folding clothes, noticing how shadows lengthened over the tatami. A father stood on the veranda, feeling the temperature drop a single subtle degree. Children instinctively grew quieter, sensing that the day was preparing to rest. As darkness settled, lanterns began to glow. Homes used small paper lamps or oil lanterns crafted by local artisans. Their light was never harsh. Flame moved gently behind thin paper panels, warming the room with a delicate golden color. It flickered softly with each breath of air, casting shapes across walls and floors. A single lantern could transform an entire home, making it feel warmer, smaller, more intimate. Some families placed lanterns near shoji doors, letting the glow spread outward through the paper, as if the house itself were breathing light. In towns, lantern makers prepared for evening just as families did. They trimmed wicks, checked the paper for small tears, and filled tiny ceramic bowls with oil pressed from sesame seeds or rapeseed. The smell of burning oil drifted through narrow streets, earthy and slightly sweet. As lanterns lit doorways, shops, and small alleys, towns transformed into soft constellations of warm, steady light. Guardians of the night, town watchmen, walked slowly with handheld lanterns. Their footsteps echoed against wooden walls, and their steady rhythm reassured families settling in for rest. Outside, nature claimed its own space. Crickets began their nightly chorus, a complex sound woven from dozens of different tones. Frogs near rice paddies joined in, their voices rising and falling like distant drums. Bamboo groves rustled as the wind passed through their tall stalks. These sounds were never seen as noise. They were part of the night's character, grounding people in the world outside their walls. Even inside homes, the insect chorus seeped through cracks and seams, creating a soft background that lulled children toward sleep. With nightfall came different behaviors. Adults moved more slowly. Children stayed near the hearth or beside a parent, not out of fear, but instinct. Homes felt cozier, as if shrinking to protect their occupants. People lit only as many lanterns as necessary, saving oil and maintaining the comforting darkness. A single flame often provided enough light for an entire room. Families gathered near it, sharing quiet conversations about the day or simply enjoying each other's presence. The warmth of voices felt different at night, lower, softer, blending naturally with the calm around them. Sometimes a tiny warm moment would bring a smile to the home. A child reaching drowsily for a futon might misjudge distance and pat the empty tatami beside it, causing a parent to stifle a soft laugh. A cat, thinking itself unseen, crept closer to the hearth only to bump gently into a wooden bowl, then glance around as if hoping no one noticed. Older family members exchanged quiet smiles at these small mishaps. Nights had room for such gentle humor, wrapped in light and shadows. Along rural paths, travelers sometimes passed by with dim lanterns that swung slowly as they walked. Families inside could see the glow drifting between trees like a small wandering star. The sight brought comfort. It reminded them that life continued beyond the home, even in the dark. Sometimes the faint murmur of a traveler's voice reached the house before fading into distance. People rarely ventured out at night unless necessary.
but those who did moved with quiet caution. The land felt different after sunset, still familiar but larger. Windows and shoji doors played an important role at night. Families adjusted them carefully. A child might slide a door shut but leave it slightly off its track, prompting a parent to shift it into perfect alignment with one practiced motion. The soft click of wood settling felt satisfying, as if sealing the night outside without closing the home. Thin walls allowed sounds to pass easily. A neighbor adjusting bedding, a dog settling on a veranda, the faint echo of a watchman's call. These small noises connected homes gently. Inside, evening tasks continued at a slower pace. Someone prepared tea, steam rising and soft threads from a small pot. Someone else arranged bedding, shaking futons lightly so they breathed in cool night air. Herbs hung from rafters, mint, mugwort, small bundles for health, gave off faint scents as air moved. Meals finished earlier left a lingering warmth in the kitchen, a memory of cooked rice and simmered broth. Everything softened: sound, sight, movement. Some homes kept protective charms near doors or windows, small carved wood pieces with prayers, woven grass ornaments, amulets from shrines. Their presence brought quiet reassurance. Families trusted small rituals, sprinkling salt near an entrance, lighting incense, and whispering a wish for peaceful sleep. These acts deepened the sense of safety inside wooden walls, even as the world outside stretched into mysterious darkness. Town streets, though dim, held their own life. A late merchant might close his shop slowly, sliding wooden shutters into place with a long, smooth sound. A pair of neighbors spoke in hushed tones under a lantern, exchanging news or a gentle joke before parting. A distant dog barked once, then fell silent. Even inns, where travelers sheltered, maintained restraint as night deepened. Voices lowered, footsteps softened, lanterns burned low. When the moon appeared, it added a different kind of light. It shimmered on rooftops, glowed against white shoji, cast long shadows across gardens. People sometimes paused to look at it, feeling its quiet presence. Moonlight did not compete with lanterns, it complemented them, adding a cool layer to warm glow inside homes. The combination made the night feel fuller, deeper. As bedtime approached, the world dimmed further. Families ended conversations, children slipped under blankets, adults checked lanterns one last time, doors closed softly, the final embers of the hearth glowed red. Insects continued their chorus, now softer. The home drifted toward sleep, carried by the steady rhythm of night. Nightfall in ancient Japan was not a separation from the world, it was an embrace. The land, the insects, the lanterns, the shadows, the wooden walls, all created a quiet, breathing environment where rest felt natural. And in this deepening calm, the home prepared for the final transition into sleep, guiding us toward the intimate world of bedding, nets, and midnight air.
But once the last lantern dims, something gentle unfolds. And when the house grows still, one more layer of night appears. As night deepened in ancient Japan, homes shifted into their quietest shape. The day's final warmth faded from wooden floors. The soft crackle of the hearth slowed to a faint glow beneath the ash. Outside, the chorus of insects settled into its cool rhythm. Families moved with unhurried steps, preparing bedding, checking lanterns, arranging the sleeping space. Each motion felt practiced, shaped by years of repetition, like a ritual that brought comfort simply through familiarity. The center of the sleeping world was the futon. During the day, it lived rolled up in a wooden chest or on a shelf near the veranda. At night, it returned to the tatami like a familiar friend. Adults unrolled it with wide, slow movements, letting the cotton inside breathe. Children tried to copy these motions, their hands tugging too quickly, creating little folds and bumps. A parent smoothed the fabric quietly, smiling when a child insisted, "This time it's perfectly straight."
It rarely was, but the attempt warmed the room. Kaya nets, the soft woven curtains that protected sleepers from insects, were another nightly companion. They hung from wooden hooks in the ceiling or from simple frames made by local craftsmen. The fabric, usually a muted green or pale natural color, seemed almost magical. Under lantern light, it glowed like a gentle mist. When families drew the net around their futon, the world grew smaller, softer, more private. The night remained outside, but its sharpness faded. Weavers who crafted these nets understood their importance. In regions like Nara and Omi, artisans produced extremely fine mesh. They worked slowly, guiding threads through looms with steady hands. Each movement formed tiny squares, small enough to block mosquitoes, open enough for air. These nets were valued almost like heirlooms. Families repaired them carefully, stitching tears with quiet attention. Sometimes a child lifted the net toward a lantern, marveling at the tiny pattern of holes. Parents allowed it. It was a way of learning how things were made. Inside the net, the sleeping space became a world of its own. Lanterns burned low, casting warm, uneven light across the greenish fabric. The glow softened faces, making them look peaceful even before sleep arrived. Children felt safe inside this delicate enclosure. They whispered small thoughts to each other, nothing urgent, just the gentle reflections of the day. The cicadas were loud today. The rice smelled sweet. The cat stole my place again. Parents answered softly or simply listened, letting calm settle naturally. Outside the net, insects tapped lightly against the fabric, wings brushing it with subtle sound. In humid summer air, this tapping formed a familiar rhythm. It never startled anyone. It reminded them that the world remained alive. On colder nights, insects disappeared, replaced by the faint creak of cooling wood. A beam adjusting in the rafters, a door sliding slightly in its track. Sounds that felt like the house resting too. Winter sleep carried a different feeling. Extra blankets were layered over futon. Quilts stuffed with cotton or plant fibers made sleep heavy and warm. Breath sometimes appeared faintly in the cool air. Children curled naturally toward parents, and sometimes a parent drew a sleeping child closer with a slow, half-awake motion. Warmth created its own gravity, pulling the family into one quiet cluster. Some homes use small ceramic warmers filled with embers. They placed them near, but never inside the bedding. The warmth drifted in gentle waves. A curious child might reach toward it before a parent whispered, "Not too close." The child nodded solemnly, as if entrusted with an important secret, then returned to their futon. Sleep carried its own subtle rituals. Some families placed a pinch of salt near the entrance. Others lit a final stick of incense. A few whispered short prayers to ancestors. None of it was dramatic. These gestures blended into the texture of night, as naturally as the tatami blended with its shadows. Even outside, midnight breathed with its own quiet scenes. A watchman walked along the edge of the village, tapping a wooden staff softly on the ground. A dog settled onto a veranda, circling twice before resting. An innkeeper checked lanterns one last time, lowering the wick so it burned slowly until dawn. Soft voices drifted from sleeping rooms, travelers shifting, dreaming, or murmuring without waking. In the corner, a merchant's straw sandals rested against the wall, their worn edges telling the story of many distant roads. Sometimes a tender moment broke the stillness. A child swatted at a dream insect, then sighed softly. A parent half asleep smiled without opening their eyes. Or a cat, curious, nudged its head under the kaya net, only to retreat quickly when it realized it could not get inside. Families observed this with quiet amusement, careful not to disturb the calm. As the night deepened, the boundaries of time softened. People no longer sensed time through clear divisions.
They felt time instead in the cooling air, in the way insects changed their song, in the slow lowering of lantern flames. Some woke briefly, adjusting a blanket, checking a child's warmth, then drifted back into rest as naturally as breathing. Inside the net, dreams unfolded softly. Tatami released warmth from the day, lantern light dimmed to a faint glow, bodies relaxed fully, sinking into futons arranged with care. The world outside faded to a distant hum, a memory beyond reach. Sleep enveloped the home slowly, comfortably, like a familiar story told without words. And as this deep quiet filled the rooms, the night carried the household forward, guiding us toward the next layer of ancient Japanese life, where scent, bells, and darkness shaped the way people understood the passing hours. But in the stillness of midnight, time moves differently. And within the drifting scent of incense, another quiet truth reveals itself. Time in ancient Japan did not march forward with sharp numbers or mechanical clocks. It breathed. It settled. It unfolded gently across the land, guided by shadows, sounds, and fragrances that marked the passage of hours as softly as falling leaves. People sensed time through the world around them, not through fixed devices. And the deeper the night became, the more delicate this experience grew. Inside homes, the air thickened slightly with evening coolness. Lanterns dimmed as their wicks shortened. The rhythm of insects shifted, their songs deepening as though they too followed a hidden schedule. For families resting under kayonets, these subtle changes felt like the natural language of the night, an unspoken signal that moments were quietly passing. One of the gentlest tools of timekeeping was incense. In certain homes, and later in towns and special districts, families used incense sticks or shaped incense trails that burned in smooth, predictable lines. A faint curl of smoke rose from them, drifting above tatami and wooden floors. The scent, soft, earthy, sometimes slightly sweet, spread through the room in slow waves. People knew how long a particular incense line took to burn, half an hour, 1 hour, maybe 2 if it was thick and carefully pressed. A master of incense crafting might shape it into a winding path so that time seemed to move through graceful curves rather than straight lines. In refined establishments, tea houses, performance rooms, or homes of nobles, incense was shaped into spirals that burned gradually inward. Each small section represented a portion of the night. Some spirals even held tiny metal beads embedded in the trail. When the ember reached the bead, it fell with a delicate, almost musical sound into a waiting dish. Not a chime, more of a whisper. But in a silent room, it was enough for someone to understand how far into the night they had drifted. Incense makers knew how important precision was. They worked in small workshops attached to their homes, mixing herb powders with wood dust and pressing the blend into shapes. The smell of raw ingredients, aloes wood, sandalwood, clove, filled the air. Artisans moved with steady focus, judging texture by touch, measuring by hand. Young apprentices sometimes sneezed from the strong fragrance, prompting a patient, knowing look from the master. A look that seemed to say, "You will grow used to it." And over time, they always did. Temples offered their own form of timekeeping. Deep bells, struck at regular intervals, sent waves of sound rolling through valleys and streets. Each bell had a unique resonance, long, deep, gentle. They did not command the night, they guided it. People lying on futons recognized the bell's voice even half asleep. A distant chime told them how far the night had progressed, or whether dawn was beginning its slow rise behind the mountains. In villages near monasteries, this harmony of bells and insects created a texture of sound that shaped the entire night. In towns, nighttime sounds traveled easily through thin walls, a neighbor adjusting a lantern, the soft tapping of a watchman's footsteps, a faraway door sliding open, children turning over in their sleep. These unintentional signals marked time in a way clocks never could.
Even the dimming of lantern light was a quiet clock of its own. Oil burned steadily but slowly, and people learned to read the softness of the glow. Perhaps the most intimate form of timekeeping was simply the feel of the air and darkness. Without looking outside, families sensed when midnight approached. The night cooled noticeably. Shadows deepened in corners. The last warmth of the hearth vanished from the floor. Even within a kayanet, the air grew denser and more still. A parent might open their eyes briefly and think, "It must be late," not because of any sound, but because the darkness felt more complete. There were smaller, almost humorous markers too. A futon feeling too warm meant early night. A futon turning cool again meant the deepest hours. A child mumbling nonsense in sleep often signaled the middle of the night. A cat deciding to walk across the room, always stepping exactly where someone's foot was, suggested that dawn was not far away. Precision was never the point. Rhythm was, and families found it naturally. Roosters offered timekeeping of their own, though not always reliably. Sometimes a rooster crowed far too early, waking an entire household before anyone realized it was still hours until sunrise. A child might sit up, convinced it was morning, only to be guided gently back into their futon by a sleepy parent whispering, "Not yet." The night held an affectionate kind of confusion, a reminder that even nature made small mistakes. In wealthier homes, some officials and scholars kept simple clocks imported from China, or later, Europe. These devices were delicate, often inaccurate, and required constant adjustment. Yet even those who owned them preferred incense or bells because mechanical ticking felt foreign compared to the softness of traditional markers. People did not seek precise minutes. They sought the feeling that the night was unfolding properly. The traditional 6-hour system, dividing day and night into uneven segments named after zodiac animals, reflected the shifting length of daylight through the seasons. In temples and castles, monks or guards marked these intervals with drums or bells, guiding communities through patterns that had shaped life for centuries. For most people, the truest measure of time was simply the rhythm of work and rest. A mother waking briefly to adjust a blanket, a farmer turning over in sleep, feeling the day's weariness settle deeper into his bones, a potter's apprentice dreaming of spinning clay, a traveler in an inn listening to wind brush against paper shutters. These human motions carried the night forward more reliably than any device. As the scent of incense thinned and the last echoes of bells faded into the dark, another transition approached. The deepest part of the night, with all its softness and drifting senses, slowly prepared to hand the world over to dawn. And from this quiet understanding of time, the path leads us toward travel, toward roads, and toward the fragile world of inns where strangers slept under the same shifting hours of the same ancient night.
But beyond the quiet walls of home, the night carried a different rhythm, and along the winding roads, another layer of ancient Japan quietly revealed itself. Travel in ancient Japan was never simple. The land stretched across mountains, forests, rivers, and narrow strips of fields. Villages and towns sat like scattered lanterns along coastlines and valleys. To move between them meant stepping into a world shaped by weather, terrain, and the quiet unpredictability of the road. Most people rarely traveled far. Many lived and died within the same cluster of fields. But for those who walked the roads, the journey carried both beauty and gentle risk. Paths varied widely. Some were wide enough for 2 travelers to walk side by side. Others were little more than thin tracks pressed into soil, winding between rice paddies and bamboo groves. In summer, heat shimmered above the fields, carrying the scent of wet earth and growing plants. In autumn, dry grasses brushed softly against travelers' legs. Winter made everything still and firm, the cold nibbling lightly at exposed skin. Spring brought mud that clung stubbornly to straw sandals. Every season shaped not only the journey, but the traveler's mood. Travelers moved at a calm, patient pace. Merchants carried goods in wooden boxes balanced across long shoulder poles. Pilgrims walked with staffs that tapped rhythmically against the ground. Messengers, often young and quick, still respected the terrain's slow rhythm. A wandering monk might pause beneath the pine tree just to breathe in the cooling air. Roads had their own temporary community, a shifting ribbon of strangers sharing the same direction for a moment before parting again. Wooden signs marked distances to the next post town. Some were clear, others had faded from rain and years of sun. A traveler might tilt their head, squint at a nearly invisible character, then shrug gently, choosing to trust their steps rather than the sign. Moments later, another traveler would do the same, two strangers sharing a tiny, silent joke without ever meeting. Rivers interrupted many journeys. Simple plank bridges connected villages across water that sparkled gently during the day and darkened into smooth ink at night. Where no bridges existed, ferry boats waited, flat-bottomed vessels guided by boatmen who knew the water's moods. The boat rocked softly as passengers boarded. The sound of water brushing the hull blended with reeds whispering at the riverbanks. Children, trailing with families, sometimes reached toward the water, only to pull back sharply when a cold splash surprised them. As evening approached, travelers looked for post towns, small settlements built around inns, stalls, and resting places. Lanterns glowed long before darkness fully arrived, standing like warm markers against the silhouettes of mountains. Inns varied greatly. Some offered clean tatami, warm meals, and soft bedding. Others were simple wooden structures with thin walls, little space, and shared rooms where strangers slept in quiet rows. Innkeepers understood the slow rhythm of travel. They prepared humble meals of rice, soup, pickles, or salted fish. Steam rose from pots into the cooling night air, filling rooms with a comforting scent. After eating, travelers rested, stretching tired legs, wiping dust from sandals, warming hands near braziers. Conversations stayed soft, as if everyone instinctively respected the shared fatigue. Sleep in an inn carried a different feeling from sleep at home. Futons rustled quietly as people turned. A cough drifted through a thin wall. A door slid open with a tired sigh of wood, then closed again. Lantern light flickered across multiple faces, blending them into one peaceful, anonymous group. A young merchant might whisper a small joke about his worn sandals. These survived another day, somehow. Nearby travelers smiled gently, sharing a brief spark of warmth among strangers. Outside, watchmen patrolled the post towns. Their lanterns swung slowly with each step, casting soft circles of light on the ground. They tapped wooden clappers at intervals, marking safety and presence. The sound traveled easily through the clear night. Even visitors found comfort in it. Someone was awake, watching over the town. Weather shaped nights on the road. Rain created its own rhythm. A soft patter on roofs, dripping from eaves, pooling quietly in hollows. Travelers sleeping under shared roofs heard it and felt a deeper sense of shelter. Winter winds brushed against thin paper walls, making lantern flames tremble. Summer nights hummed with insects, their steady chorus weaving into the dreams of those inside. Mountain routes made journeys harder. Inns perched along high paths were small and sparse. Lanterns glowed faintly against the surrounding darkness. Wind whispered through pines with a deep, steady hum. Pilgrimage families rested in these remote shelters, breath visible in the cold. A child often fell asleep immediately, clutching a charm or small toy bought earlier.
Parents covered them gently, whispering gratitude for reaching shelter before the path vanished under night. Not every road was peaceful. Bandits existed, though most travelers never met them. More common were simple troubles, a sandal breaking at the worst moment, a sudden rainstorm, or a confusing fork in the path. Still, many found safety through companionship, sharing a few miles with a stranger, exchanging tea, offering directions, or simply walking side by side. These small acts created a network of goodwill across the land. Villagers saw the road as both possibility and uncertainty. It carried news, goods, visitors, and stories. Stories of distant markets, mountain temples, sea harbors, or unfamiliar customs. When travelers arrived, villagers offered water, shade, or small guidance without expecting anything. Hospitality was a quiet instinct, born from the understanding that travel was tiring, and kindness was often the safest protection. As night deepened, post towns settled fully. Lanterns dimmed one by one, roads fell silent except for wind brushing gently through tall grass. Travelers rested under unfamiliar roofs, carrying the gentle truth that sleep on the road always felt slightly different, lighter, more alert, shaped by the awareness that another day of walking awaited. And from this soft world of roads and resting places, our path leads gently into another hidden layer of the night, toward shadows, charms, fears, and the delicate rituals people use to keep the darkness at bay.
But beneath the gentle rhythm of daily life, another truth waited quietly. And within the calm smiles people shared, one more hidden weight rested in silence. Life in ancient Japan often appeared peaceful from a distance, rice fields swaying, wooden homes breathing with the wind, festivals coloring the year in soft, familiar hues. But beneath this beautiful surface lived a world shaped by hardships, not dramatic ones, not loud ones, but slow, persistent challenges that touched every family. These hardships did not erase the beauty of daily existence. They formed its quiet foundation, something people learned to carry with steady patience. For most families, survival followed the rhythm of the harvest. Rice was precious, not only as food, but as tax, as status, as the measure of security for the year ahead. A single season of too much rain, too little sun, or unexpected pests could shift a family's fortune entirely. Farmers walked their fields with careful eyes, checking the height of seedlings, the color of leaves, the softness of soil. A mother knelt beside young shoots, feeling the earth with her fingertips to judge its moisture. A father listened to the wind, sensing whether a storm might arrive early. Even children helped chase birds from the fields, clapping sticks gently to scare them away. When harvests failed, villages grew quiet. Meals became smaller. Families mixed rice with millet or barley to stretch what they had. Children noticed before anyone spoke. They watched parents divide food with more care, more hesitation. Yet tenderness lived even in these moments. A parent placed an extra bite in front of a child, whispering, "You need to grow strong," pretending they themselves were not hungry. These silent sacrifices were common and held some of the deepest forms of love. Illness moved quietly through communities as well. Without modern medicine, even a simple fever brought worry. Herbs, warm rice gruel, and whispered prayers offered comfort, but no certainty. Monks trained in healing brewed remedies in calm temple rooms, grinding roots and leaves with patient movements. Herbalists in towns prepared powders and mixtures, tying small packets with thin cords. Their knowledge came from careful observation: what soothed, what strengthened, what weakened. Families cared for each other tenderly when sickness arrived, cooling foreheads, keeping lamps burning, murmuring encouragement. Neighbors brought food even when they had little to spare. Hardship often brought people closer, strengthening the bonds that held communities together. Homes themselves, though warm and familiar, were fragile. Built of wood and paper,
they offered little protection against fire. A single stray ember, a fallen lantern, a sudden gust of wind could spark danger. Villagers lived with this awareness quietly. Thatched roofs, though beautiful, required constant upkeep. Roof menders traveled village to village, carrying bundles of straw and long wooden needles. They climbed rooftops with calm concentration, reinforcing weak spots, smoothing uneven sections. Children watched, whispering predictions. "He will finish before sunset," or "it will look new again," treating the repair almost like a small performance. Parents smiled softly at their seriousness. Earthquakes added another layer of unpredictability. A light tremor made bowls rattle. A stronger one shifted beams or loosened tiles. Families paused during quakes, waiting quietly until the earth settled. Afterward, they examined the home together, realigning doors that no longer slipped smoothly, stacking stones back along garden paths. Hardship taught patience, not fear. Travelers faced their own risks. Roads were not always safe. Bandits existed, though many avoided violence if possible. More common were simple accidents, twisted ankles, sudden storms, unstable bridges. Inns offered rest, but sleeping among strangers meant accepting unpredictability. A merchant might wake to find another traveler's blanket half over him, pulled in sleep like a wandering cloud. A farmer might snore so loudly that others exchanged drowsy smiles before drifting back to rest. Such harmless inconveniences were part of the broader difficulty of life on the road. Women carried enormous weight within families. They tended children, managed homes, cooked meals, prepared fabrics, worked in fields, and maintained household altars. Their labor filled every hour, yet they moved with steady grace. A mother carried a baby on her back while guiding older children through chores. A grandmother, hands lined with years of work, wove or sorted grains while telling stories. In towns, merchants' wives helped with accounts, customers, and daily tasks. Their quiet attentiveness supported the entire household. Their contributions were essential, yet often unspoken. Men carried their own pressures. Farmers owed rice taxes regardless of harvest conditions. Samurai served their lords with loyalty and constant training, bearing responsibility for their household stability. Craftsmen relied on skill and reputation. A single flawed object could harm their livelihood. Every profession carried silent burdens. People rarely complained loudly. Grievances lived in small sighs, gentle comments, thoughtful pauses. Yet even within hardship, people found ways to stay emotionally balanced. Festivals brought relief, bright decorations, shared meals, dances, laughter. Hot baths soothed sore muscles after long days of work. Storytellers lifted spirits in town squares. Families found humor in small moments. A child balancing a basket too large for their head. A man slipping on mud while insisting he walks perfectly fine. These tiny ripples of humor protected the heart. Communities supported one another naturally. If a home needed repair, neighbors arrived with tools. If a family mourned, people brought food and offered quiet company. Even strangers received kindness, directions, tea, or shade. Hardship taught generosity, reminding everyone that help might be needed at any time. Nature itself carried both beauty and severity. Typhoons bent bamboo, tore roofs, flooded fields. Snowstorms isolated villages, halting travel completely. But people adapted, storing supplies, reinforcing homes, rotating tasks, caring for tools. Hardship became woven into life, not as something rare, but as something expected, manageable, and shared. And as the night deepens in this understanding, the path leads gently toward another truth, toward the emotional heart beneath everyday interactions, where families, neighbors, and small quiet gestures shape the harmony of ancient Japanese life.
But within every quiet home, another warmth lived between people, and behind the stillness of daily routine, one more gentle bond held everything together. Family in ancient Japan was not defined only by blood. It was a small world of shared gestures, unspoken understandings, and daily rhythms passed quietly from one generation to the next. Harmony, in its calmest form, grew from this closeness. People rarely spoke in grand phrases about love or loyalty. Their affection lived in small actions woven into each day. A bowl placed quietly at someone's side, a sleeve straightened, a futon shaken out for another before tending to one's own. These simple motions formed the emotional center of life. Inside homes, the day unfolded with an easy choreography. Parents worked, children imitated, and elders offered guidance more with glances than with words. A grandmother sitting near the veranda called a child simply by clearing her throat, a soft, familiar sound the child responded to immediately. A father, preparing tools for morning field work, paused to adjust a child's knot or tuck a loose strand of hair behind an ear. These gestures were small, but they were the threads that held harmony together. The warmth of community extended far beyond the home. Villages functioned as one large, loosely connected household. People helped one another with planting, harvesting, and roof repairs. They exchanged vegetables, rice, and stories. If a neighbor's lantern flickered out unexpectedly, someone nearby knocked gently with a fresh wick or a bit of oil, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A mother left a small bundle of dried herbs on a doorstep because she heard a child coughing the night before. These small kindnesses were never announced. They simply existed, woven quietly into village life. The heart of harmony showed itself most clearly in shared silence. Families often worked side by side without speaking. The soft sound of tools, footsteps, and breath formed their language. Silence was not emptiness, it was connection. During meals, there was no expectation of constant conversation. The clink of bowls, the rising steam of soup, the warm presence of loved ones, these were enough. Children learned early how to read the room, how to sit calmly, how to sense emotions without words. In towns where homes stood closer together, harmony lived in manners. A merchant bowed slightly when passing someone on a narrow street. A craftsman stepped aside to let a mother carrying a baby go first. Neighbors greeted one another softly, with familiar warmth but without loudness. Even dogs seemed to sense the gentle atmosphere, wagging their tails slowly, padding across verandas, barking only when they truly needed to. Inside households, roles created balance. Elders held knowledge, parents held responsibility, children held possibility. A grandfather taught a child how to fold cloth with slow, patient movements, knowing the act of teaching mattered more than the cloth itself. A grandmother weaving or drying vegetables paused to share short stories, half memory, half lesson, planting seeds of understanding that grew over years. Harmony included humor, the tiniest, softest kind. A child struggling to lift a bucket too heavy insisted, "I can do it," their knees trembling as parents hid quiet smiles. A grandfather napping insisted he was just resting his eyes, even though everyone had heard his soft snoring moments before. A cat stretched across the warmest spot on the tatami, refusing to move even when approached. Its stubbornness created shared laughter instead of frustration. These gentle moments strengthened the home's calm. Festivals deepened the sense of togetherness. Lanterns lined paths, families dressed in simple, clean clothing. Neighbors walked toward shrines carrying offerings and hopes for the coming season. Children ran ahead, excited by food stalls and music. Adults bowed before kami, expressing gratitude for health, harvests, and safety. Warmth filled the air. not only from lanterns and incense, but from the collective joy of a community moving in harmony. Even after returning home, the glow of festival night lingered, softening the next morning. Within homes, emotional balance relied on small considerations. People avoided harsh tones. Calmness was chosen over conflict. If disagreements surfaced, they resolved them quietly, often with pauses longer than words. A parent stepped outside to breathe. A child sensing tension sat still, offering the kind of silent support only children give. These moments reflected a cultural instinct toward balance, a desire to preserve tranquility even through difficulty. Chores held harmony too. During winter, when work moved indoors, families gathered around tasks, weaving, repairing tools, preparing dried foods. The room warmed not only from the hearth, but from the closeness of shared activity. A father polishing a ladle, a mother sewing a sleeve, children threading strings through dried persimmons. These motions kept the home functioning and strengthened emotional unity. Mistakes were met with gentle correction, never impatience. In coastal towns and mountain villages, harmony included respect for nature. Families adjusted routines for storms, snow, or heat without complaint. People saw themselves as part of the natural world, not separate from it. When storms tore roofs, neighbors arrived with ladders and rope. When snow blocked pathways, villagers cleared them together. Nature's challenges became opportunities for the community to show its quiet strength. And beneath all interactions lived an unspoken truth. Harmony was not a permanent state. It was a practice. Families tended to it like they tended gardens, repairing misunderstandings as they repaired roofs, watering bonds with kindness, cutting away anger before it grew. Even in hardship, harmony remained a guiding light. As night approached, families gathered for their final shared moments of the day. A lantern glowed softly, tatami warmed beneath folded legs. The last cups of tea released gentle steam. Conversations drifted quietly or faded entirely. The home, filled with the calm breath of its people, settled into perfect peace. And from this soft heart of family and community, the path leads naturally toward the closing reflection, toward the final look at a life made from small details, subtle moments, and the unbroken patience of time.
But even when all stories grow quiet, one more truth remains. And within the smallest moments of daily life, the heart of ancient Japan continues to breathe. As the long journey through ancient Japan draws to a close, the world we have traveled through settles once more into gentle silence. Homes soften in the distance. Lantern light fades behind paper walls. Rice fields reflect pale shades of moonlight, stretching calmly toward the edges of forests. Roads we walked in thought now rest beneath darkness. Villages, towns, and mountain paths blend into one soft landscape, unhurried, peaceful, shaped by countless small details rather than grand events. Life in ancient Japan was not defined by loud victories or dramatic days. It was shaped by the quiet motions of ordinary people, the rhythm of seasons, and the light touch of nature guiding every choice. The soft opening of a shoji door at dawn, the gentle tap of wooden sandals on a veranda, the warm scent of rice steaming in a small kitchen, hands passing a bowl from one family member to another. These tiny fragments formed the structure of life, a world where simplicity held beauty and discipline created peace. People understood time differently. They did not rush to fill every hour.
They let shadows, wind, and shifting light guide them. Days felt like conversations with nature. Conversations carried out slowly, respectfully, with pauses long enough for thought. A farmer walking through his field did not only see plants, he listened to them. A potter shaping clay felt the smallest change beneath his palms. A child watching a kite rise into the sky felt joy not as sudden excitement, but as a gentle widening inside the heart. And within these routines lived one quiet lesson. Everything mattered, even if nothing demanded attention. Families found meaning in the details. A mother noticed dust on a shelf and wiped it away softly. A father mended a tool not just because it was needed, but because the act itself created harmony. A grandmother folded clothes with deliberate care, smoothing every crease as though smoothing the day's worries. Even humor lived in the corners of these moments. A child tripping on a rolled futon and insisting the futon moved first. A grandfather losing his teacup, only to find it sitting calmly in front of him, smiling at its quiet mischief. Community relied on details too. A neighbor leaving herbs at someone's door. A merchant sweeping not only his shop, but the street outside. A small sign that shared spaces deserved shared care. Villagers helping repair a roof without waiting to be asked. People bowing not from formality, but from gentle respect. These gestures, small and constant, created a world where cooperation felt natural. Nature framed life in soft, unbroken cycles. Spring rain carried the smell of new soil. Summer nights buzzed with insects singing children to sleep. Autumn winds rustled golden leaves across temple paths. Winter wrapped everything in quiet. Snow resting on rooftops, breath turning pale, the world pausing beneath its white stillness. People adapted without complaint, moving with the seasons rather than against them. Travelers, too, experienced Japan through small details. A wooden bridge slick with rain, a ferry boat rocking gently on a smooth river. Lantern-lit ends welcoming tired feet. The scent of miso soup drifting through a half-open door. Even difficult journeys carried quiet charms, moments too simple to explain, yet unforgettable long after the road was gone. Homes aged with grace. Wood darkened from years of lantern smoke. Tatami mats softened from countless footsteps. Paper walls yellowed gently with time. Families did not rush to replace these signs of age. They cherished them. History lived not in luxurious heirlooms, but in scuffs on the floor, marks on wooden beams, a patch sewn onto a child's garment with patient hands. Spirituality blossomed from details as well. A grain of rice left as an offering, a quiet bow before an altar, a stick of incense curling upward like a whispered hope. Temple bells echoing through forests. These subtle rituals anchored people in something larger, a guidance both gentle and constant. Meaning was found in balance, not abundance. Balance between work and rest, between speech and silence, between effort and acceptance. People valued what they had: a good harvest, a repaired roof, a warm meal, a healthy child, a peaceful night. These were treasures measured not in wealth, but in gratitude. Even hardship, storms, sickness, hunger, exhaustion, was softened by daily rituals. A shared meal, a lantern glowing against the dark, a hand on a shoulder, a neighbor offering company. Harmony did not mean life was easy. It meant people met challenges together, step by step, with steady, hopeful hearts. And now, in the quiet of this final reflection, imagine dawn forming gently over ancient Japan. Light touching the tops of cedar trees, mist rising above fields, a rooster calling somewhere in the distance, a fisherman tying rope with practiced hands, a child rolling up a futon, a mother pouring tea, a father stepping outside to test the morning air. The world waking not with noise, but with calm continuity. And so the journey ends where it began, with quiet houses, wooden rooms, paper walls, family warmth, the presence of nature, and a life built from small details. A life where simplicity is beauty, and every breath, scent, and motion matters. From here, our path drifts softly back to the present. The doors of ancient Japan close tenderly, leaving behind a peaceful memory, a faint echo of incense in a quiet room, guiding your thoughts gently toward rest.